Szóval sziasztok, jó estét! Törös Ildikó vagyok, a Mirum Budapest ügynökségnek az ügyvezető igazgatója. Bevallom, hogy én nagyon más területen dolgozom, mint így, és de ugyanakkor nagyon örülök, hogy ilyen szép számban eljöttetek, meglátogattatok minket. Remélem mindenkinek akadt ülőhely, meg majd lesz elég pizza meg sör. Úgyhogy akkor nem sokkal Gáborékkel kezdjük az előadást. Kérlek, hogy gyertek máskor is, fogunk ilyet szervezni, és jó beszélgetést a prezentáció után. And let me introduce Tony. Tony, who is our operational manager here in the Budapest office for the digital services, and he will tell you some words about our company and agency.
Yeah, just welcome everyone. It's nice to see you. Actually, having so many here, we were kind of hoping like something like 18, 20, but there was like 34 or something plus our own people here. So welcome. It's as I said, nice to see you, and thanks for Gabo for organizing the event. Hopefully, we all learned something today. Just a few words about our company. You probably know Mirum, or everyone that Mirum has been working here for a couple of years now. But in the beginning of this year, we kind of merged with JW side, which is the marketing side, and now with the Mirum. And now we're actually working under Mirum name as the one office. So basically, at the moment, there's altogether I think 29 people working here, and we're growing quite fast since a few months ago, basically. So we started to recruit more and more people. So welcome here, and hopefully we can organize something like that in the future as well. Welcome.
Thank you. Thomas. So, let's start the presentation. Okay, as you know, our topic is that we mentioned that how we build component-based Drupal teams, and the keyword or the key phrase is the component-based here. So I'd like to talk about a little bit of what does it mean, what is component-based, and why it is interesting, and why it is good for us. So what does it mean, component-based? Traditionally, we created web pages, but it's an old thing, and we should say something else. We should talk about system of components. So all web pages are built from components. These are smaller parts of the page, which can be nested each other, which can be repeated, reused. So every time, we always build system of components, just maybe we didn't know that. But that's what we do, and that's what we should do, and what we should realize. I don't know the first, but maybe the best known methodology of this thing is the atomic design. This phrase was created by Brett Frost in 2013, and since then we use this as an analogy to component-based design, and that's what we used when we build our recent Drupal sites. So how to show you what is this? I think the best way is to have a video. I think all of you seen this video at least one time, but we will see. So that's the video, and this starts, okay. So what is atomic design? What is it all about? As you can see in the video, it's just about what I mentioned. It's about nesting. We start with the smallest parts of a page, which are called in this methodology atoms. These are the labels, these are the inputs, the buttons, the small parts. They then organize into bigger components, which are called molecules, and molecules builds up organisms, and from organisms we have templates, and when we have real data, or when we have data in the templates, then we get pages. So very shortly, this is all about atomic design. This is the core of the methodology, but it's important. This is a methodology, it's not a tool. But there are a lot of tools to make possible to work this way, and that's what we show you, two of them. One of is Pattern Lab, it's combined with Emulsify, and the other one is Fractal. But first, the project I was working on, this is the Vandermortel BE site. This is a recipe site. Main recipe site is about foods and cooking. It's a multilingual to English site. And as you can see, there are a lot of things which build just one page. There are repeatable things, and we can just realize that these can be components. This can be built in a component-based way, and this can be good. But how? Also to tell you, it was mainly a 1 or 2 man project, so only 1 or 2 of us was working on. It was easy from one side because its communication was much easier. But also if we were more in the team, component-based design and components would make our life much easier. So, but how did we do it? As I mentioned, we used Emulsify. What Emulsify is? First, Emulsify is a Drupal 8 starter kit theme. And in the emphasis on that it is a starter kit theme, which means it's not a base theme, it's a collection of code, primitive code, which you download and copy, rename the things you need, it's automated of course, and you build your site on it. And when Emulsify has new releases, it won't update your code. If you want to update anything, you have to do it manually. So that's the difference between a base theme and the starter kit theme. So it's a starter kit theme because of a reason. Yeah, but it's also serves as other thing, but I will show you some other things before I talking about that. Also, Emulsify is a style guide. Style guide means it's a collection of your base styling of your site. It means colors, it means typography, it means fonts, and these things. It's also a component library. We just started to talk about components. So it's a collection of components, and it's also a prototyping tool. In its core, it helps to build a static site which just makes as a catalog of all your colors, elements, components, or templates, and also a static version of your pages or your site. And the way Emulsify makes it happen, that it includes Pattern Lab. Pattern Lab itself is a static site generator and a tool to make possible to create all these things. And it's automated with GoApp. Also, it's interesting and important that it's the core of the component-based theming tool set, but it itself is a very complex thing. And as I mentioned, Emulsify not just the Drupal theme, but what is also important, it makes just creates the integration between this Pattern Lab thing, between the static Pattern Lab components and Drupal. It has a lot of components premises in Pattern Lab, and also they are included into Drupal. So when you install it, you can just start to work on your components, and they will just be available in your Drupal. It can be seen as the theme of your Drupal site. And it's an important thing, as you will see with Fractal. It's not the case. When you use Fractal, we have to make the integration ourselves. So it's a good thing that we have that. Okay. So I don't know how much of you have already seen Pattern Lab, that I made a short video of this. So this is the main UI of Pattern Lab. So as I mentioned, this is a static site. It just updates when you create a new component and you change something. And this is structured this way. You can see, oh, maybe I can use this. Yeah. So you can use the menu. So you can see the atoms, molecules, organisms, templates, pages. As I mentioned, as I was talking about atomic design. Also, you can set sizes and so on. When I start the video, it will be much better. I think so. Yes, that's it. So we are going from the biggest element, biggest components in the whole page, and I get to see it. So it's a full site. We can change the size. These are marked as SML, but these are generated randomly, so L is a different size anytime you click it. We could use disco mode, but we won't here. We could set the size as you want. So as I mentioned, this is a page, and this is the template. This is the page of the product. We could use template, which will be a similar without data, and we have organize, which builds the pages. For example, we have card grids. We have, I think, 5 or 6 different card variations on this site, which are displayed as grids. In the Drupal site, these are views. In Pattern Lab, these are data, just with the markup we create. And these are the variations. We have also heroes. We can check. There are 2 variations, and it's good that we can use one code to create variations of the component using different data, which includes the text we show and the settings. Also, Pattern Lab just automatically shows us where a component is used and what components it's used itself. So the included components, and also it's where the all component is used. If we go down a level again, we can go to molecules. For example, we can check all the menus we have the site. We have a lot of one. Breadcrumb, footer menu, inline menu, block menu, main menu, different versions, social menu, items. And the smallest parts, basic elements, atoms, for example, the text variations. So they are organized here. This is a static site, and you can make it available for your client. You can publish it without the Drupal site. For example, you can publish it in GitHub pages. And you can update it with pull requests, and the client just can check the changes. The good thing that you can build a static site is much quicker than create the full Drupal team and full Drupal site. And even if you just start to design the page, you can do it online. You can show it to the client. It's much easier to communicate your changes or your ideas to them. So it's a good thing as well. Also, I didn't mention, but some other advantages using component-based theming, and for example, Emulsify, that you can use anyone who know about front-end development, knows some HTML, CSS, maybe GS, and can understand a simple templating language. And you don't need the Drupal developer to create the whole front-end. You need the Drupal developer, the Drupal front-end developer, only for including these components to your site. It also makes possible to just create make the back-end development and the front-end development separately and parallelly. So you can work much quicker using this method. Also, which is, for example, very important for me, if you create your components this way in a static prototyping tool, you can get rid of the Drupalisms. So you can forget about that something will be a field, something will be a view, something will be a node, and you can just create your components in a more natural way. You can name them as they will be. Something is a button, something is a cursor, something just an image, a block. So you don't have to know what component it is when you create the components. You have to know that when you integrate it with Drupal, but that's a different story. And also, as I mentioned, and you will see, components are reusable as is a core of this whole methodology, that you can reuse your components. It makes your code base much more dry, much drier. Okay, let's see the theme structure. It's a simplify things. So on the top level, you have your Drupal theme. Oh, I forgot to mention. You can use Emulsify as a Drupal theme and pattern Lab inside it, but if you don't need a Drupal theme, but you would like to use Pattern Lab and maybe with Drupal and with other technologies, for example WordPress or something else which can provide data, you can install it without Drupal, and you can just develop using this without Drupal as well. But in this project, I just used this as a Drupal theme and had Pattern Lab components inside the Drupal theme. So in the top level is your theme name. Oh, sorry, it's like that. Well, I want it. Just wrong button on the presenter. Okay. So yeah, and below that we will find the components folder. We have a lot of folders in Emulsify, and that's why I think it's good to talk about how it's structured. In the components folder, you will find the data folder, And it's important because you can keep your global data files here. This serves as the source of the data displayed in Pattern Lab. And the global files just used everywhere in Pattern Lab. You can have a component level data sources as well, which overrides the global data, but component level data can be used only the base instance of the component and can be reused. I will talk about it later. So this is the global data folder. You can use data JSON and YAML files as the data source. We have a patterns folder which holds our components which are structured as the atomic design methodology. We have a base folder, atoms, and so on, all the ones we saw before. Going up one level, we have a disk folder. This will hold all of our generated code. So this will hold our optimized and minified GS files or CSS file compiled from SAS and so on, and anything else. We can have an images folder. We have an images folder inside here, which is important because it holds an icons folder, and it is the source of your. It can be the source of your SVG sprite because Emulsify has a really great SVG sprite generator which works very well and makes it very easy to create SVG sprites. Of course, we have to have the Drupal templates folder holding the Drupal or Drupal templates and also other main level files, for example, local good config.js, which can help to configure your graph tasks. Libraries, YAML file, which is needed when you define your theme libraries, and so on. That's all. So let's see how one component can be built. For example, we can have a hero component. We can have, and maybe we will have, a hero CSS file. It's a component level CSS file. Also, we should have a hero tweak file, which generates the markup and also is the source of the markup or Drupal components, Drupal theme. We may have a GS file, which belongs to the component. It's not necessary. We also may have a YAML file or JSON file, and this is the source of the local data. So if you component level data, you can use to override global data, but it will display only when you see this one component, and when you include a component in another one, it not will be inherited. So I not use local data files, but it's possible. And we also can have a markdown file to just create annotations which will describe the component in the Pattern Lab instance. It has to understand all the developers or the client what the component is about. Okay, let's see some code. Here is a very simple and small component. This is an atom, and this is the whole code of the component. It's basically a span tag with some text in it. It will be that. But before we go in there, we have something interesting here. I didn't mention yet. We get some cool big extensions with Emulsify. One of them is the BAM function. It helps you to manage your BAM class, CSS class naming in a good way. It helps you organize them and reuse them. It also manages the Drupal attributes. You can define base classes, modifiers, if the element you are styling is an BEM element, that you can set a separate block name, and you can also add extra classes to it. So that's it's all about. It's maybe strange at first look, but it can be very natural and shortly if you start to use it. And also, as I mentioned, we just use a variable to define in the template the place for the text which will be displayed in the site or in the Pattern Lab when we use. A source can be or the text. This text in Pattern Lab, data generally, data JSON, something in the JSON file, and in Drupal it maybe will be the source of the data we display here in this variable Drupal field. Okay, let's go over. Next one is a little bit bigger component. It's a card. It's the second valence molecule, where we include the stamp component, which we saw just before. It's worth to mention, but it's just a small part of the card component. It's much bigger. This is an interesting part for us. So we can include another component, a smaller component, in this component. There are three ways to reuse components in it. We can use include, we can use extend, and we can use embed. Most of the time we use include and sometimes embed. That almost no. I think never use extend in this thing. Okay. And as we use it, we define the exact path of the component, and then we set with the with keyword that what kind of info we want to give to the component when we include it. So we said we use the with, and we want to say that the stamp text will be the card stamp text, that we define the variable value and another value and another variable. But also for the stamp modifiers, we say that it will be a simple string in this case, and this will be transformed. And this will create our classes for us. As I mentioned, we can reuse components anytime. So this is another example. In a level 3 component, a molecule, we just reuse or stamp again, we include it again. And now we define also infos, but we say this time that the stamp text will be the hero stamp text as another variable, which can be another value if we want, or it can be same if we define the same value for this variable. And I can show you how it looks in Pattern Lab, and also it can be it looks the same in Drupal. So this is the stamp component, in this case included in the card component, and this is our hero component, and it's also have the stamp component in it. So that's what we see when we implement this code. Okay, so we were talking about the Pattern website, and the next step that include it into Drupal. So this is a Drupal template. In this case, this is a node product teaser template. So it's a teaser template of a Drupal node. And in this case, we include the card component, and we not include, but we embed it, as I mentioned. We also define the card stamp text, and in this time we say that it will come from a tag field, a taxonomy field. It will be the value of that field, the first value of that. And the reason why we used the embed instead of include, that we also override the image part of the card component. It was defined as a twig block, and when we use embed, we can override it and define another value for that here. And that's it. So basically, that's all we have to know, and we repeat this all the time as we build our Drupal theme and as we build our component-based design system. Of course, there are challenges, not just advantages, but challenges. I want to mention some things which was hard or not so much understandable. The first thing, if you think, so as I mentioned, you get a whole structure and a lot of things already done with Emulsify. If you don't like the structure you got with Emulsify, you are in trouble. As I mentioned, everything is included just using exact paths, which means if you want to reorganize them, you have to do a lot of work, change the paths everywhere, and every include, embed in all levels. So I tried it, it was a bad idea. I made some days of work for myself, extra work. Okay. Sometimes it's hard to decide if something is a molecule or an organism. It can be so hard that some people build an online tool to help you decide that the components you build is a molecule or an organism. It's important just because, as I mentioned, that you can reorganize your design system, your Fractal design system, when you decide if something is what is something and include it here and there. Okay, it's hard, or maybe not hard, but you have to be care about keep your components simple. I mentioned that there are 5 or 6 card variations in the OneMortal site, and as I worked on this site, I just saw that these are all cards, and there are just simple differences, a little bit different color, little different positioning. So, but these are in their core the same card. But I was wrong. Well, as I implemented it, I made a very, very complex card code with a lot of ifs and states and so on. And I made something which is very complex and hard to maintain. So I recommend you that always try to keep your components as simple as possible. And it's better to create more components that have fewer ones which are more complex. Okay. As I mentioned, Emulsify and Fractal is automated with GAP. And the GAP system which comes with Emulsify is so complex that it is included as a separate npm module, which is a thing, but it has almost no documentation. And if you just want to start to use it, it's okay, because in the documentation you have to run npm run start or yarn start, and that's all, and it will start and watch your files and compiles, and that's okay. But if you want to do something else, you have to go into it, and you have to investigate hours or days to understand all the tasks which are included in each other and so on. So it's not the best thing. I think it needs some more and better documentation. Also, your GAP task comes with some browser sync options. I think it was not trivial to set up correctly. So that's it. Okay. A small thing, it's not so hard, but good to know that GAP in Emulsify and maybe by default doesn't recognize new components. So you start watching your repository and you create a new component. You have to stop the watch and start it again to recognize your new component, or if you rename it to something, make a change like this, you have to restart it to be able to see it. Okay. Maybe you remember I showed you that there are in the top level of the Fractal structure or the atom design structure, we have templates and we have pages. And you know we also have page templates in Drupal. And in the way it's Emulsify implements it, just the page includes the default template, and the Drupal includes the page template from the component library. And it makes a strange inheritance chain, which sometimes makes it hard to find where should you define something and where can you override it. So it's easy to override something in the child template, but much harder if you want to change something in the grandchild. So I had to deal with that as well. Okay. Drupal has one field template. It's very generic. It has a lot of variations in it. But when you implement it and you create your real components, it means you have to create a lot of different field templates for yourself, or you will create very complex field components for your Drupal fields in the pattern. So it's a thing which can be done for you. It's have you to implement for yourself in your project, but it needs a lot of work to make all the different variations which just have the right structure, don't have more or less what you need. It has the right classes, not the generic field class, but more meaningful classes and so on. As I'm a front-end developer whose backend knowledge is very limited, I found very hard sometimes to get the right data from Drupal. Drupal has a very complex render array system. We have entities with entities, referencing entities, and so on. So you can have hard times to find just the right structure to call the data in your tweet template, in your Drupal template, which you want to use. A very good tool to have this is the word dumper module, which is much more performant than the Kint module, which is recommended for the same purpose. It can help you to just see your data structures in a lot of levels, but you have to understand what you see, which is not trivial. Okay, as I mentioned, this is a multilingual site. There are no tools in Pattern to create multilingual sites, so if you want to create that, you have to work on your data sources on your own. Also, integrating your data in Drupal with the right language variations, for example, to display an excellent term in the right language can be challenging. And the small one for the end, all the CSS, SCSS files compile into only one CSS file, which means no matter what you have in a page, you will always load the whole CSS, which is not too performant. It could be done much better, but it needs a lot of work. It is done with GS, for example. It should be done with CSS as well. So these are the challenges, but we have challenges, but I say it's good to use Emulsify. I feel to make it much more natural to work in it, to create components, including them Drupal. So I recommend to use them. And if you need some helping hands, I can recommend the Drupal Tweak Slack channel and the Pattern Lab room in it, which is called the Pattern Lab, but it's almost just an Emulsify room. And it's also a good point of Emulsify. That was a good reason to use it, because a lot of people use it. You can have support from much more people, as maybe less, and the other options had maybe more people to help you. So that's all I wanted to tell you. Of course, there are a lot of things, a lot of challenges, and everything which we could talk about. But these are the basics, and I like to ask you to send me questions if you want, if you have, and I try to answer. So it's your turn.
Thanks for your.
So do you have any questions, or this still seems to be a magic? Yeah.
So is there any other starter kits? So why do you use
Emulsify?
Emulsify?
Yeah, there are several ones. I think there are, I know about 6 or 8 ones. And the main reason I choose Emulsify was that I saw that this is the most supported one. So it has the most, I don't know if I can use the word community, but maybe it has the most living community. That's it. Any other question?
Do you recommend to use this path as a general tumble through for every project, or what factors do you mitigate once you decided in that project for that client, does it fit into the budget or not?
It's a good question.
The time,
Yep.
the deadline, or the team size, that if you have the proper backend support or you don't have, or...
So I think you have to just decide on the Faxino about your projects. Using a component library means a little bit more work than working directly in Drupal, because you create a separate thing. But it can be beneficial. So you have to decide if the benefits are worth for your project, for your client, for your developer team, or not. Mm-hmm. So I can say a general recommendation. As a developer, I can say that I really enjoy to work in this way. Mm-hmm. And it was great.
Thanks.
Something else? Yeah.
Do you use this pattern lab in your every project, or it just customer-based decision?
It was the first project when I used it, but if I can, I'd like to use it again. So it was great. If I can, and if it fits to the project. So So, yeah, okay.
How can you deal with JavaScript libraries? For example, we have a carousel or something like that. How can you implement it in a pattern website, and how can you integrate back into the Drupal site? Because on the Drupal site, you have to use the Drupal behaviors to trigger and attach element handlers. And how can you do it with this method?
Fortunately, the developers of the Emulsify starter kit created a trigger extension which can help to include your JavaScripts in Pattern and in Drupal as well. So you can write your JavaScript site as you would write it for your Drupal site. You should include them using your Drupal, the libraries YAML file, and using this attach, you can just make it work in your Pattern lab as well. So the only thing you should define, just to keep the component-based structure, your GS files in a component level. And then in your library, you define the path to it relative to the component. But you can write GS and you can use it. And you can use Drupal behaviors as well. But I did not use behaviors in this project because I just used vanilla GS. So I didn't use behaviors, I didn't use jQuery. But it's possible and it's supported. Is that okay? You have a strange face. So should I talk about more about it?
No.
No? Okay. Any other question? Yes?
What is the browser support of this component?
I think it depends on your work. So I think Pattern works in any current browser and maybe i11. I think so. And then the other things are the way you work and you create your components and CSS. So, for example, I used CSS grid in this site, and I also had to support i11, but this is possible. So I recommend that as well. Yeah?
I arrived a bit late, so maybe this was covered.
Okay.
But do you see a future where maybe other starter kits are Emulsify? So I think maybe you would get an Emulsify version of Bootstrap based theme, so that all the CSS and the components are arranged in a way that it is readable by Pattern Lab.
I think it's technically possible. I don't know if the developers, this is a 4K chance, have just time and resources to make it happen. As I saw, it is well supported and have a living community, but not evolving rapidly. So maybe it won't happen with Emulsify, but if you need that, you could do that.
So would this work then maybe the other way around, that Bootstrap becomes dependent on Emulsify?
Oh, I don't think so. I think so.
So then you practically have to write all your own CSS and templates if you want to use this. I mean, you have to use Emulsify to be able to connect your flow to Pattern Lab, if I'm correct.
I think currently you create your integration between Emulsify and Fractal Lab to make it happen, but you should look for it. I didn't look for it because myself I don't use Bootstrap and don't like it too much, but maybe there are people somewhere who doing it. It's possible.
There are many other UI libraries, so does maybe Pattern Lab have some sort of templates for popular versions of UI kits?
As I know, Pattern Lab itself has a lot of UI kits and also have a lot of starter kits. But itself is a very big topic and I'm not an expert of it. I was happy to find Emulsify and have a working solution in which I can start just working immediately.
Because it's not UI toolkit, but it's part of a development process. So it allows you to develop the isolation of the target system. So you can you've got more QA checkpoints, you've got more opportunities for client feedback. Before you've committed to build anything with target automation, you've really got a working UI and where UI toolkit is that you want.
But as I know, Pattern Lab itself has a site which is dedicated to just make a showcase of the different Pattern Lab variation and styles and so on, which means the UI and also the thing that you can build with it.
as an agency like Mirum, I guess many people are working with multimedia files and designing and using different platforms like UXPin or Sketch or something else. Then what happens if they provide you at the beginning of the project with a style guide on their taste? And then the front-end developer comes that, hey guys, I have already my own style guide. So is there any communication between or some integration between? So
no technical integration. It was the case in this with this project. So when I started to work, I just got the designs. I got a lot of PhDs. It was said this is the design, so let's implement.
Yeah. So the double work doesn't need necessarily to be done both for the designers and by you, but you should come to the same table and discuss that. Okay, I will do that.
Yes.
So you use the Sketch and Zeppelin together to get the styles out of the Sketch and put the Sketch styles into pattern level Fractal. And then we reverse engineer them back into the Sketch. Then you sit down with the designer up front and decide style names and overall guidelines of what the design is going to be. You make the process a lot smoother, but there's still a manual step at the end of, so somewhere between Zeppelin and Fractal, if you're reworking, you need some manual work with the creative, but if you sit next to creative, then that whole process is a lot simpler. So there's still like an air gap, but it's possible.
If you have a designer who can write HTML, CSS, and GSM, then you are lucky because you can create the mockups in this way. Maybe you don't have to use too much Photoshop or Sketch or Illustrator.
Yeah, sure.
Like that.
So communication is always good.
Yeah, I mean it always. Okay. Yes.
What's the minimum project size you use? So with the one page, it's running.
I think to create a one-page site maybe is too much, but to work in a component-based way, maybe not Emulsify, but a single integration can be beneficial.
So
I think so, but as I mentioned, this is the first project I used it. It was good for me. And for this size of project, it's not a really very big site, it was beneficial. Okay. So if you don't have more questions, we have the second part of the presentation with Gábor somehow.
First of all, I want to say a thank you for Norby who hold this part of the beers. So thanks Norby for the beers.
More beer.
And then we talk about Fractal, which is also a tool to create like atomic designs, but actually you can not just create atomic design, but you can use it for any kind of design systems. But you know, it built for atomic design. It will be more technical, I think, because Tamás already talked about the atomic design. So let's see, some code. All you need for Fractal is just Fractal, right? And Mandelbrot is a template for Fractal. It's great. You can use any kind of template that you create for Fractal. Like you can create one template for yourself for development, and another template for the customer to see the component libraries. And the third one is the Twig adapter, because we want to use Fractal with Twig, because basically we build Drupal sites and it just makes our life easier if we use Twig. And that's why that's here. By default, Fractal uses handlebars, but you can use Nunjuks, Twig, handlebars, these three for sure, but I think there's more templating language what you can use. So for the configuration, after you set up your project with yarn or npm, you need Fractal.js, and there's some lines that you need to add. That's all. Which is important here, you can define the main directory where your components sit. Currently this is the src/components, and you create the subdirectories like atoms, molecules, organize, and these kind of libraries. The static path is about like images and those kind of things, which is not about the designing system, but these shiny things like image or a video or these kind of things. And the third one is the builder for that, because when you finish your work or want to create a showcase for the customer or do a prototype, you don't want to run a web server, but you can build it, and it creates static HTML and CSS files, and that's what we show to the client. The configuration also quite straightforward. You just need to set up the twig adapter and also add the twig as an engine and basically some lines of code, and you are ready to go with twig. So these are the typical folder structure if you are using Atomic Design. But if you want to use another type of design systems, maybe you create your own design systems, or your designer creates some other design system with another idea, you can use any kind of libraries. But you see at the right side, this is the 24ways.com design systems, how they structured their components. And yeah, an example how it looks like, what files we are currently using in a component. The only thing what you need in Fractal is the template file, which is a view file. In this case, this is the case study.twig. And you can add more, like you can add the config file, where you can define things that I will show you later. You can add more view files, like this case study colors twig, which is a kind of variant of the component, and also add RCSS GS files here. And this could be interesting but under asked how but you can use JavaScript and CSS, I think. So this is very good if you build your system in a way that every component that you create in Fractal will be a module in Drupal. You can create every module. You can create their own libraries in Drupal, and you can include only just the desired libraries in every page. And you can make smaller JavaScript and CSS. Yeah, there will be more file on the server, but lower bandwidth is what you need to serve the pages. Yeah, also a typical config file, how we use Fractal. You can add like title, label. Yeah, title is for the menu, label is for the header, text. But you see the default is the default variants. Variants are the component variants, and under the variants you can see here 3 variants, and which is interesting here is the context variable, where you can actually add variables like show 1 items, 2 items, or make reserve the order, or change the color, or add a class, and these kind of things. And some other variables what we don't use, but it can be used. So you can use the hidden variable if you want to create a component and you don't want to show up to your customer in the menu. You can add the hidden true, and if you know the exact URL, you can access that component, but the customer can't click on any menu item and can't see it. So this is a tricky hiding of things. With the order, you can change the components order, which is basically an ABC order. With status, you can display small information to the client or to yourself or the QA team if this is something which is work in progress, or this is something which is planning, or this is something which is ready to build the Drupal, or this is something which is finished, or anything what you want, you can say. And the notes is just some notes what you can see at the Fractal's UI, not in the code. Yeah, Fractal has a very nice command line tool. Yeah, it's called Fractal for sure. And with this, you can set up your Fractal library very easily. Just write this Fractal new anything what you want. You can go to the folder and you can run Fractal start, and you are ready to go. And to build your Fractal atomic design or any kind of Fractal system. This is the same parameter what we always use when we are developing. It's actually turns on processing, and if you change anything in the code, it automatically refreshes the browser, and you can see the changes immediately. Also, there are some other parameters what you can add here, like you can change the default port. Yeah, because Fractal use a small built-in server, and it runs in localhost on the 3000 port. You can use any other port, and also you can use a theme if you want to, if you are using a default theme for development, want to check the theme, what the customer will see, you can check it very fast with this command. But yeah, and one more, Fractal build. Fractal build, yeah, this is what creates the static version of your Fractal library. But this is not the way how we use Fractal. Of course, we use gulp, and gulp runs Fractal, because we not just want to run Fractal and refresh the site when we change the markup, but also we want to run RCSS, compile, linting, SVG manipulations, and these kind of tools. So you can for sure integrate Fractal into gulp. The only important thing here is to turn on the error handling, because if there's an error, your gulp task will just break, and you need to restart, and that's a mess. So that's the only one that you need to take care. The other things is just quite straightforward. Of course, if you don't use gulp 3 but gulp 4, there's a shortcut, and it's very hard to write this code. Comp is another tool. This is not Fractal. This is another tool which could be helpful for you just to don't create manually the files for the component. Yeah, this is like a 1 minute job to create 3 files, and you can just write this comp new component name, and which is just 2 seconds to create the boilerplate. Yeah, so quite easy and handy tool. You can use it not just for Fractal, but for everything. One thing that we add to our Fractal is this code, which actually does nothing, but something. And this something is if we use the Drupal behaviors in our JavaScript code, we can just copy paste the whole JavaScript in Drupal and don't need to take care about anything, and it works, right? And it just works. Yes. Without this, you can't use Drupal behaviors, and you are just exploring these kind of things. You get a whole of mess when you run twice or 3 times image gallery, and you want to click one page, and it goes to 3. Yeah, that's why this is so important. Why we use this Fractal Twig Drupal adapter? The important thing here is that it not just contains the Twig functions and the Twig language, but it contains some Drupal formatters, like this T function, and actually this function does nothing in Drupal. It's just to make our code easier. We can add these codes in our Twig template, and just much easier to copy into Drupal the Fractal template. The theme structure is very, very similar what Tamás showed you some minutes earlier. We just don't need to take care about the files. So at the components, it can be atoms, molecules, organized, any kind of libraries. And when you include your components, you just need to use the right folders here, and it works. So you can change much easier with Fractal your folders. And this is a very typical way how we use Fractal. This is a paragraph. Yeah, recently we use paragraphs, and every paragraph is a component, usually unorganized, and we just include the Fractal, include the organizer from Fractal. Send the vars similar as Tamás did. The only difference here that in other projects we just create the vars in a preprocess, in a paragraph preprocess function, and here we just use the vars. Some advantages why we use Fractal. Yeah, technology dependent. This is interesting for us in several projects because sometimes we need to build projects for customers who, in one way, need a design system, a component library, a living style guide, but they not just want to use on one side, but multiple sites. And it's just much easier if you build not in Drupal, because in this way it's much easier to integrate it with, I don't know, with React or Angular or Laravel or any kind of other applications. Yeah, faster prototyping is not just true for Fractal, but also for Pattern Lab, because you don't need to take care for Drupal. You just need your front-end part, and you can push it to your GitHub repo, and the pipelines should build the static files, and it's available to the client in some minutes, or for the QA team in some minutes. And don't need to take care of databases and Drupal settings, and don't need to wait for backend work. And also less code. I mean, this is about the atomic design. So this is about the way how we think when we create a site. We need just create a button once, not every time write the same, or just any kind of molecules just create once and use it again and again. Need a little bit more thinking how to build a system, but at the end it will be beneficial, so beneficial. And also this is what I told at the first beginning of the presentation, that the style guide is also component library for the customer. They can see all of the molecules and all of the colors and these kind of things. And it really great help for him to, if they are building a new site, a new sub-site, or a new I don't know, marketing page or something like that, it's just much easier to think what he can do if there's a living style guide. And I will show a short demo because I didn't create videos like Tamás, but let's see if there's internet. Yeah, there's an offline version. No, there's another button here, mirror. Yeah, looks much better. So this is how looks like Fractal by default, and this is the menu here at the left, which you can show in Pattern Lab at the top, and you can see this is a totally other way how we left organized the design library, and yeah, you can find here, you can see this 3D. This is the status of the current component, and at the bottom there are some more useful infos. At the view you can see actually an Nginx code, which is quite similar to Twig. And the HTML, you can see the rendered one, right? So in the context, this is actually the config. Here, ClearDev used JSON, and we use YAML. You can choose what you want to use with Fractal. So this is the JSON version of the context. At the info, you can see the name of the component. You can see the system path. This is important if you use Drupal and want to, include the component. And also you can see where this component used. But this component doesn't do anywhere. Here you can see the references and referenced by, so the connection between the components. So what you don't have here at the Fractal is that the predefined sizes to check your component in every size, but you have this tool, this line, and you can set up and you can quickly see how it works on smaller or wider screens. And also, if you don't want to see the menu and the information bar at the bottom, you can open all the things in a new page, and you can see here your component. So basically, that's all what I want to show you about Fractal, and some words about Fractal Pattern Lab. Basically, at Mirium, we started to use Fractal 2.5 years ago in many projects, and it was good for us because front-end developers without Drupal knowledge can work on Drupal projects, and it just makes our life much easier. But later Tamás came, and Tamás wanted to do something new, and we gave him the chance. Yeah, and he found that Emulsify, and we tried that, and yeah, it's good to see how work both things. And I think in a lot of topics where we have good answers in Fractal, that's because we use Fractal in like 4 projects so far, so we have much more knowledge how to use Fractal, and that was the first time when we used the Pattern Lab, and Tamás did fundamental project, so that's why we used both. Any questions?
So I noticed that you are quite happy when you need to write only a few lines of code to create something amazing, and I'm with you on that, but how often is it happening that something you have to fight with Fractal?
So it's something?
So something goes wrong with Fractal itself, and it's part of your already quite...
Something goes wrong.
Yeah, but no, whatever.
It just works.
So it never happens.
No. Every time when I write gab dev, it just works. Which start a Fractal start, and so there were no mess, no unlimited installs and reinstalls and no things like that.
But it's still an Node.js gem or something, right? So
yeah, Node.js module, yeah.
Those are not really famous for being super compatible.
Yeah. The thing is that Fractal is mature enough, or finally good developers did something good. I don't know, but it just works. No one has any problems in dealing with Fractal.
I'm always kind of skeptical with these tools because the front-end DevOps scheme is already quite big for me. So I have GAP, I have like 20 different package managers and whatnot, runners, whatever.
Yeah.
So adding one more is always my spider sense is triggered.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
So you didn't have any bad experiences really. It was everything went smooth.
Yeah.
Great.
It's a very stable tool, Fractal.
Cool.
Yeah. Just one thing that I want to mention, if you are talking about atomic design, it's not just important what tool you choose, like Pattern Lab or Fractal, but also really important that the designer also knows about the methodology and use the same buttons on every page, right? And also the business analyst knows the methodology and create the tickets and write the system in the way where we can reuse the things. So
This is a fundamental
so this is
thing.
not this is so this thing is not right if the front developer thinks that, hey, let's start use atomic design. If the designer and the other people like lead devs or BIs don't think in this way, it's very hard to use any kind of atomic design system.
Do you guys think contributed module could do parts of the job these tools do? So I'm thinking maybe there's an installation profile which, if you use that, it will use your current theme and template files and put them nicely in, somewhere in the menu where it displays a style guide, and I don't know, maybe provides fields for fields where you can define the default value of that when the style guide is being rendered, you know. So this is yet another tool to bring in, and I kind of have the feeling that we have plenty of tools in Drupal to provide similar functionality right within Drupal. And then we eliminate the hassle of getting these third-party UI thingies, talk to Drupal and back and forth and go around with the exporting JavaScript and importing that.
So
this goes to anybody basically.
Yeah.
It's an open-ended question I had for a long time.
Yeah, I have something, but this is not an answer for you. But so you don't need to use like Fractal or Pattern Lab if you want to use atomic design. If you just create like a small thing or a smaller site, you just create like ints folder and put there some click files, and you can just include these click files, right? And don't need this bunch of tools.
But there is a tool for that. I think, I'm not sure because I'm not ready yet, but you should look for the UI patterns module.
Oh.
And it's not just a module, but it's an ecosystem of itself almost, I think so, which has to create patterns inside Drupal. So that it's a very complex thing that I plan to try it at the time, that maybe that's the thing you think about, but you don't have to forget that the theming part of Drupal is a very complicated thing with its nature, with the renderer and its references, but maybe you should choose that.
Okay.
And you can use any pattern thinking with the UI patterns, but you need to integrate, for example, pattern components and so on, but you can use it without any of them.
Yeah, but then you are back on the invented here question of Drupal redoing it, and that you don't get the benefit of pulling in a random front-end developer who understands this pattern system, and they could start working with Drupal without learning the Drupal specific parts.
Yeah, and just agree with the backend guy to create the variables with that names what I use in Fractal and Pattern Lab. It's very easy to put variables through the system, and that's the whole connection between the front and the backend development, basically. So thank you. We have one more presentation from Zoltán, who will talk about the update status.
Yeah, upgrade status.